In a small clinic nestled in a quiet neighborhood, a routine checkup turned into a shocking confrontation. As a young black girl sat nervously in the waiting room, her hopes for a smooth visit were shattered by the discriminatory remarks of her attending doctor. Unaware that her father, a prominent CEO, was about to arrive, the doctor's mocking tone cut deep, leaving the girl feeling helpless and ashamed. Meanwhile, across town, her father was deep in a crucial board meeting when he received the distressing call. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, he rushed to his daughter's side. The tension in the air was palpable as he confronted the doctor, demanding accountability and respect. The clinic staff, caught off guard, watched as a powerful battle unfolded between a father's love and a doctor's prejudice. What happens next will challenge perceptions and reveal the true power of standing up against injustice. The room fell silent as the father, a towering figure in both presence and reputation, locked eyes with the doctor. Behind his composed exterior was a storm of emotions. He wasn't just a successful CEO. He was a father who had taught his daughter to hold her head high, no matter what. Seeing her tear-streaked face and hearing about the doctor's cruel words struck a nerve deeper than any business deal ever could. The doctor, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of his actions, dismissed the confrontation with a smug smile, as if the matter was trivial. But the father wasn't one to back down. He demanded an explanation, not just for the blatant disrespect, but for the larger issue of how people in positions of trust could act so recklessly. As the clinic staff exchanged uneasy glances, it became clear this was more than a personal dispute. It was about something far greater. The father took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "Do you even understand the weight of your words?" he asked, his tone calm but piercing. The doctor, still unfazed, shrugged dismissively. "I treat everyone the same," he replied, his words dripping with indifference. That statement hit hard. How could someone so blind to their actions be entrusted with people's care? The young girl, still seated in the corner, glanced nervously between her father and the doctor. She had always admired her dad's ability to stand up for what was right, but this was different. This was personal. The other patients in the waiting room whispered among themselves, their curiosity growing as the confrontation unfolded. Meanwhile, the clinic's manager, hearing the commotion, stepped in. Her attempt to defuse the situation only added to the tension. "Perhaps we can discuss this privately," she suggested, but the father wasn't ready to let it slide quietly. He knew this moment was about more than his daughter. It was about making sure no one else had to endure the same humiliation. As the standoff continued, the lines between personal pain and societal responsibility blurred. The tension in the room was unbearable. The father stepped closer to the doctor, his voice steady but firm. "You may think this is just another day for you, but this is my daughter's dignity we're talking about. This is her trust in people like you to do the right thing." His words cut through the air like a knife, leaving everyone silent. The young girl clutched her father's hand, finding comfort in his presence. But the hurt in her eyes was impossible to ignore. The other patients had stopped pretending not to listen. Their faces reflected a mix of shock and quiet support, as if they too were waiting for someone to speak up. The clinic manager tried again to calm the situation. "Let's not make a scene," she said, her voice shaky. But the father wasn't interested in protecting anyone's reputation, especially not the doctor's. He pulled out his phone, determined to document the moment. "If this is how you treat people, then the world deserves to know," he said. The doctor's smug expression faltered for the first time. The father's words, his unwavering stance, and the growing attention in the room were beginning to rattle him. Still, he tried to brush it off, muttering, "This is unnecessary." But the father wasn't backing down, and the room felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen next. As the father stood his ground, phone in hand, a voice from the corner of the room broke the silence. An older woman, a patient who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "You're not the first to feel this way," she said, her tone both calm and resolute. All eyes turned to her as she continued, I've been coming here for years, and I've seen how this doctor treats people who look like us." Her words sent a ripple through the room. Other patients began nodding in agreement, their murmurs growing louder. One man, seated near the door, added, "I stopped bringing my wife here because of the way he talked to her. We just never thought we could do anything about it." The doctor's confidence visibly cracked, his eyes darting nervously between the growing crowd and the father's unrelenting gaze. The father looked at the woman who had spoken, then back at the doctor. "So this isn't just about my daughter. It's a pattern," he said, his voice rising with conviction. The clinic manager, now visibly flustered, tried to regain control. "Please, everyone, let's not jump to conclusions," she pleaded. But it was too late. The energy in the room had shifted. What had started as a private confrontation was now a collective outcry. The father turned back to the doctor, his voice sharp. "You owe every person here an explanation and an apology." The doctor opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, the door to the clinic swung open. A man in a suit, carrying an air of authority, walked in. "What's going on here?" he asked. The room fell silent again, the new arrival adding another layer of tension. No one knew who he was, but the way the clinic staff stiffened suggested he wasn't someone to be ignored. The man in the suit scanned the room, his sharp gaze landing on the father, the doctor, and then the clinic manager. "I'm the regional director of this healthcare network," he said, his tone firm. "I was nearby when I received multiple alerts about a disturbance here. Can someone explain what's happening?" The father stepped forward, calm but resolute. "This doctor humiliated my daughter today. He mocked her, made her feel less than human, and it's clear from what others have said that this isn't the first time he's acted this way. This is about more than one bad moment. It's about a pattern of disrespect and discrimination." The director turned to the doctor, who looked pale and cornered. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice heavy with authority. The doctor stammered, trying to downplay the accusations, but the murmurs of agreement from the patients drowned him out. The father held up his phone. "I've recorded enough to prove what happened here." The director sighed, his face darkening with disappointment. "This is unacceptable. We have a zero-tolerance policy for behavior like this." Turning to the doctor, he added, "You'll be suspended immediately, pending a full investigation." Relief swept through the room, but just as the tension seemed to ease, the director turned to the father. "And to you, sir, I owe an apology on behalf of this organization. But I also want you to know that your actions today might have saved others from enduring the same treatment." The father nodded, but before he could respond, the older woman from earlier stepped forward. "This isn't just about one doctor. We've been dealing with this kind of treatment for years," she said. Her words sparked a deeper conversation, and the director, visibly moved, promised to launch a broader review of the clinic's practices. As the father and daughter left, hand in hand, they felt a sense of justice, but also the weight of a larger fight ahead. The girl looked up at her dad and said, "You always told me to stand up for what's right. Today, you showed me how." And as they walked out the door, the crowd applauded, not just for them, but for the change they had sparked. As the father and daughter walked to their car, the weight of the day began to lift. The girl, still processing everything, asked, "Do you think they'll really change things?" Her father knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Change takes time, but today you made a start. You reminded me why it's so important to speak up, not just for ourselves, but for others too." Back inside, the clinic staff exchanged uneasy glances, realizing this moment was a turning point. The regional director stayed behind, speaking with patients and taking notes, determined to follow through on his promise. The older woman who had spoken earlier smiled as she left, her shoulders a little straighter, knowing her voice had been heard. For the father and daughter, the day wasn't just about standing up to injustice. It was a lesson in courage and the power of collective voices. As they drove away, the father glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, her small smile reminding him that change always starts with one brave step forward.